Hey, it's me, your Uncle Cooper. Sorry to interrupt your music. I do love music, especially when it's set at a reasonable volume. You know, music is really only as good as your speakers. The same is true for minivans. A minivan is only as good as the tires it sits on. And the button on the screen there, it agrees with me. If you click on it, it'll bring you to all the Cooper minivan tires that'll make your minivan a really good minivan. Go with the Coopers! Cooper!
Tired of long waits and rushed care at the ER and urgent care clinic? Next time, stay home and let Dispatch Health bring the power of the hospital to you.
I call Dispatch Health. A care team of medical professionals actually come to your house.
They're the same caliber of people that you would see if you were at a hospital or an urgent care.
Dispatch Health can treat most non-life-threatening emergencies.
They can do the x-rays, they can do stitches,
urinary tract infections, blood test, urinalysis, ultrasound.
It's almost everything that they can do at the ER.
You never feel rushed. They're there for you and only you.
I felt like their only patient.
And it costs no more than a trip to urgent care because Dispatch Health is covered by most insurance, including Medicare. See if we serve your home at dispatchhealth.com.
Dispatch Health really went above and beyond.
It's wonderful to have care come to your home.
House calls are back, and they're better than ever. Learn more at dispatchhealth.com.
Yes, hello, and welcome to the AEW Match Guide podcast. I'm your host, Sam Brown. Thank you for joining me. Every week, alongside a special guest, I take an in-depth look at one of the best matches in AEW history, taken from the definitive AEW Match Guide list as voted by wrestling commentators from around the internet wrestling community. If you enjoy the show today, you can subscribe and rate it on your podcast app of choice, support the podcast financially on Red Circle, and make sure you check out all of the other great shows on the Social Suplex Podcast Network, such as One Nation Radio, Keeping It Strong Style, All Things Elite, and the Grave Consequences podcast that cover all aspects of the world of pro wrestling. My guest for today is making his second appearance on the show, Howard Schilling, and we're looking at Sting and Darby Allin versus Team Taz in a street fight from Revolution 2021. How are you going today, Howard?
Doing great, Sam. Thanks for having me on again. How are you doing today?
Very well, very well. I'm excited to get into the second cinematic match that we've covered here on the Match Guide podcast, and one with a very different tone to the Stampede, the Stadium Stampede that we spoke about at the end of season 1. So I'm interested to get in, do some contrast, but I think this is a match with its own strengths as well, which it's going to be fun to talk to you about. But firstly, the first question I've got to ask you, normally I will ask, of course, how did you get into AEW? But this is the second time you've been on the podcast. So if people want to hear that, they can go back to the first time where we spoke about
Cody versus MJF.
Cody versus MJF. It just slipped my mind for a second there, mate. But so what I wanted to ask, I guess, for today is, why did you pick this match?
So I picked this match because Sting is my all-time favorite wrestler, and Darby Allin is one of my current favorite wrestlers. When I was looking through the matches and stuff like that, wanted to make sure that I could have a match that I could have an emotional connection to, and two of my favorite wrestlers kind of throughout history in one match, it was an easy pick.
Yep. Well, you know what? Ricky Starks is one of my favorite wrestlers going around at the moment. So we're all about that. This is a great match I'm glad you picked it, and it's going to be a great match to break down. Before we get into it, the first thing we do here on the AEW Match Guide is give the match its flowers. Unfortunately, Dave Meltzer did not rate it because he doesn't rate cinematic matches. The old Dunderman, the old board man, the old stick in the mud Dave Meltzer. But Cage Match 2, they've rated it 7.87. And on the original, so the first definitive match guide, this came in 24th. So a match that is held in a high regard, if not, an all-time, as an all-timer, but it is held in a high regard amongst the fandom and amongst the community. And I think there's many reasons for that, and we're going to get into them today. But one of them, of course, is, as you said, this is a match with some big names in it. None more so than Sting. And we're going to get into his injection into this program first. But the person that Sting was partnered with is Darby Allin, who had actually been feuding with Team Taz for nearly a year in the lead up to this match, a real long-term sort of feud that was going on. It initially began when Darby rejected the offer of Taz to train and mentor him. That happened around just before Double or Nothing, 2020. And things really kicked off in the ring when Brian Cage debuted at that pay-per-view with Taz as his manager and immediately targeted Darby Allin. And while throughout that year, Darby Allin would pursue other goals, such as he had a match for the AEW title with Jon Moxley, and also he won the TNT title against another long-term rival, Cody Rhodes. Constantly throughout 2020, he would have Team Taz as like a thorn in his side, be it Brian Cage, be it Ricky Starks, be it Powerhouse Hobbs, be it Hook. They were just a constant presence showing up around Darby Allin. Before we get to that injection of Sting, what did you think of the rivalry that Darby Allin had with Team Taz? Did anything sort of stick out to you as part of it?
So Darby's rivalry with Team Taz is almost a tale as old as time. It's a classic David versus Goliath story, especially when you infuse the Machine Brian Cage, I'll say he's one of the more polarizing wrestlers that are around today, just because, his work rate and everything like that has its own group of fans. I personally enjoy his matches, but him throwing like Darby Allin through a ladder in the the poker chip. It was the ladder match.
It was the Double or Nothing casino ladder match.
Casino ladder match. Him throwing Darby through a ladder, you knew this was going to be an uphill battle for Darby. And one of the good things that Darby Allin is amazing at, he does really good fighting from underneath. His expressions, his mannerisms, and everything like that. He's one of the most talented wrestlers in the world today. And him slowly but surely never giving up, finding inventive ways to get one over on Team Taz, as Ricky Starks came into the fold, and later on as Powerhouse Hobbs came into the fold. You knew eventually he was going to need some help, but he wasn't exactly, doing poorly on his own. And I think the addition of the icon, the man they call Sting, was a brilliant masterstroke.
We will get into that in a moment. For myself, there's a few moments that really stick out with me. The thumbtacks in the body bag, I think that was All Out when that happened. The Casino Battle Royale, they did it at All Out, where, or maybe something else. No, it was the Casino Battle Royale where they stuck him in a body bag with thumbtacks in there, and Brian Cage just yeeted him out of the ring. That was just sick looking. Also early on after in their program, when Darby Allin got thumbtacks on the bottom of his skateboard and skated on the back of Ricky Starks, which just looked completely gnarly. And also another awesome thing that Ricky Starks did was Ricky Starks was one of the first people to come out dressed as him, with the face paint and with a shirt. And of course, because Ricky Starks is someone who always dresses up in such an impressive way, and with so much swagger, when he came out, in his emo getup, I guess it was very funny to me. But I guess more substantively, I really liked how Darby Allin, his rivalry with Team Taz dovetailed with Jon Moxley's rivalry with Team Taz. Particularly, Mox had that program with Brian Cage, which happened after Brian Cage won that ladder match. And then after that happened, and at that time, Allin was that was when he was having his matches with Ricky Starks. And then afterwards, Darby Allin helped Jon Moxley out with dealing with Brian Cage and dealing with Team Taz. And then that dovetailed into him getting a title shot. And then afterwards, it was actually, even though eventually it was Cody that got turned on by Powerhouse Hobbs, it was actually Jon Moxley who initially set up, there was going to be a three-way match that would have been Darby Allin, Powerhouse Hobbs, and Jon Moxley teaming together, which ended up being Cody and Powerhouse Hobbs and Darby Allin against Team Taz. So I really liked how it dovetailed. It felt very natural, and I love the partnership and sort of the relationship that Darby Allin and Jon Moxley have got. They're kind of, it's a big brother, little brother sort of partnership, or uncle and or even almost father and son. I know later on in this season, me and Ms. Fan are actually going to talk about their match that they had, so I won't get too into that. But I love the little rivalry with it, but also respect, bond of respect that those two have together. And I liked how that sort of fed into the Team Taz rivalry that Darby Allin had. But as you mentioned, this rivalry was really taken to another level when at Winter is Coming, we would get in December 2020, we would get the debut of Sting to save Darby Allin. He came out after Cody, Dustin Rhodes, Arn Anderson, and Darby Allin were getting beaten down by Team Taz. And it was an absolutely huge entrance. There was fake snow. The theme song, it got a lot of social media traction. It was the big moment from that event. Of course, later in the evening, Kenny Omega would beat Jon Moxley for the AEW championship. But alongside that, Sting debuting was the big moment. Howard, you mentioned that Sting was your favorite wrestler growing up. And is possibly your favorite wrestler of all time. What's your history, I guess, with Sting, like growing up and everything? And then what did you think of this debut?
So I've watched Sting since I knew wrestling was. Growing up, my family, my mom and I always watched WCW back when they had the old WCW Superstar Series tapes. My mom got me Stings. I think I actually wore that tape out. I was a fan of his Surfer days, his Crow days, when he was fighting the NWO. When I actually went to school at West Virginia University, I adopted that makeup for some of the bigger games, only I would do the blue and gold face paint, just because his work is something that I really admire. When I found out that he came on with TNA Impact after WCW was purchased, I followed him there and everything like that. He had a great career renaissance there. Loved his work with WWE. Was sorry that, came to an end prematurely. And then him walking out just randomly with Tony Schiavone, someone who has called too many of his great moments and matches to count. Him doing Sting took that debut to another level. I think Jim Ross and Excalibur would have called it great, but someone with the history that the great Tony Schiavone has with Sting, he was the only one that could put it over the top. Like you said, the snow falling, the idea that, the whole concept, winter is coming. It's Darby Allin's been fighting for so long against Team Taz. His own winter is coming, but then riding in, to use a term that's been thrown around, from the north. Hi, WWE. But riding in from the north, winter was actually coming for Team Taz as he comes out. I think the only thing that could have made it better, because this happened in 2020, the only thing that made his debut better was if it would have been in front of a packed crowd. I can't imagine what kind of reaction that would have gotten. It would have blown the roof off the place. But I think it was really well done overall.
Yeah, I loved the video package with like the crow and the snowy, because it was, of course, lights down, the crow comes up, and it's just that epic guitar line, the doo 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 doo, and then it comes in with the crunching guitars, the jing 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 jing, and they don't play that theme enough. And for good reason. Like it's a long theme and a really epic entrance. But as a full presentation, the first time, I was like, wow, this looks good. And you obviously, you love Sting. I've got very little history with Sting. Like my history with Sting is next to nothing. I never watched WCW when I was growing up because I wasn't a fan of wrestling until WCW was well and truly over. So I'd watch the odd thing. I liked his stuff he did with Mick Foley because I love Mick Foley. But I'd never deep dove into Sting. So I'd seen the WWE stuff and I knew he was a legendary figure. I'd seen the odd 10. But I wasn't emotionally invested in him. And if anything, this is something that I was very hesitant about because one of the things that drove me off and really turned me off the WWE was having guys like The Undertaker constantly coming in and not only taking the place in main events and things like that, but being the ones that beat down and subjugate and get put over by the people that I think are the stars. The biggest, most glaring example I can think of is Dean Ambrose and Brock Lesnar, the way that he got treated. And then not only in the WrestleMania 32 match that they had, but then the Royal Rumble the year after, Dean Ambrose was just a guy in that to Goldberg, The Undertaker, and Brock Lesnar. So the way that WWE booked these people made me very hesitant with Sting debuting. But man, I was blown away by the presentation on this. Like what an entrance, felt so epic. And because at this point as well, while I was hesitant, AEW had my trust that they knew what they were doing. They'd managed to do things with Arn Anderson that was and Jake Roberts that were not egregious, I thought. Even the way they treated Matt Hardy up to that point had not been egregious. Sting's a couple years older than Matt Hardy. He's had a few more winters. But they'd sort of built my trust up, and I knew that it could be done because you can see, you watch like New Japan, for example. They know how to have the veterans working alongside the younger guys and not having them going over stars, but still remaining stars, and using that star power to elevate the younger guys. So I was hesitant. There was part of me that was like, whoa, I don't know about this, but I had the trust and I was absolutely blown away by the presentation.
Also, really quick, shout out to Mikey Ruckus for all of these themes. Like he keeps churning out, even in the present day. I'm going to break kayfabe first this time. So if that's okay with you. We're recording this on June 15th, 2022. I don't know when this is coming out, but like he's created so many absolute bangers for, all of the talent that's come aboard since. And I believe he produced Arrival, which is the name of the song, but I think he produced this as well. Shout out Mikey Ruckus. You are an absolute god. Thank you so much for all the work that you do. But yeah, it's like you said, that I was a little bit hesitant as well about where they were going to place him, Sting on the card and everything like that. But I think we're all kind of desensitized to that. We're a little bit gun shy, I think, when it comes to debuting wrestlers, especially the older generation. Okay, where are they going to put them? So I understand your concerns. Trust me, I was hoping that they wouldn't, as much as I love Sting, his place isn't winning the AEW World Championship. I'd hoped that they used him as a mentor role, and I am pleased to say I'm so glad that they did this with him.
Well, it took me a little bit longer to come around on this whole thing. Because moving forward, like that initial hesitancy I had was not helped by two things. Firstly, this sort of feud and the build up towards this match we're talking about. I'm going to have a lot of positive things to say about the match, but it was not a good build. There was constantly, week in, week out, there was more or less the same segment where Darby Allin would be in the ring. There would be something would happen. He would have won a match or something. Team Taz would come out and beat him up. and then the snow would fall, the lights would go out, and Sting would chase them off.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just because I didn't like the fact that guys like Brian Cage and Ricky Starks, who are genuine stars in the company at the time. Ricky Starks still is, and is a guy who I think should be heading towards the very top of the company. Brian Cage, he's not necessarily up the top, but he is a guy who is meant to be dangerous. He is a guy who is meant to be powerful. He's not a guy that should be getting run off by a 62-year-old who's, got a baseball bat, but they've got the numbers on him. And that happened for a number of weeks. And it also didn't help by the fact that I didn't actually think Sting and Darby Allin were a good pairing. I did not think they had anything in common beyond the fact that they both wore face paint. I've since been proven wrong on this, but I thought that Darby Allin, he is much more like a guy like Jon Moxley. He's a reckless guy. He is a guy who will take a beating and constantly fire back. He's a guy who marches to the beat of his own drum. To me, Sting, his character doesn't mesh with Darby Allin's, or didn't. And I did not like that pairing initially because I felt like this is purely an aesthetic choice. Yes, they both wear similar face paint, but that's not a reason to actually pair two people together. Darby Allin, in my mind, is much more of a loner. He is not a guy who would accept the help of this man.
I can see that. I'm going to take off, my fan glasses here. I'm actually going to do that.
No, feel free to disagree with me because I was in a minority. There was lots of people who loved this pairing straight off the bat.
So I'll say that I was one of those people. But that being said, looking at things, I can see where you're coming from there. Let's face it, on the surface level, the only thing that Darby and Sting have in common is, like you said, they wear face paint and they also love the color black in their clothing choices. A
lot of wrestlers love the color black.
I mean, and I will say this. I wholeheartedly agree with the repetitive nature of the statements. This build for this match, very, very uninspiring. I am a fan of Ricky Starks, not as big a fan of him as you are, but Ricky Starks back in 2020, back in 2019 as he was coming up through the NWA, and even today in 2022, he's still got star written all over him. And I hope that he does end up finding a way into, as much as I love the concept of the FTW title that he's currently got at time of recording, I sincerely hope that we are talking one day in the future about TNT champion, All-Atlantic champion, or maybe one day AEW world champion Ricky Starks. So I will firmly, get behind any support for Ricky Starks. He's got that innate charisma. Like you said, Brian Cage, as powerful as he is, they call him a machine for a reason. I'll freely admit, Sting 62, he should not be running off a 320-some-odd pound wrecking ball with a Louisville Slugger. That is where the disconnect does come into play, and I will agree with you there.
I got it the first time because it is like it's a shocking thing. Cody and Arn were also in the ring. A lot going on, and Sting does have an aura. Like I'm not getting away from that, and that aura is enhanced by that entrance that he has. But the
law of diminishing returns applies in this situation.
That's it. That's exactly it. The law of diminishing returns applied, and they diminished that one beat many times. Mm-hmm. I will say two things that I think they did well. There was one week where Sting was the one in the ring and Allin actually repelled from the top of Daly's place. So they kind of inverted it a little bit. That was great. That was a great moment. And then also the week before the actual match itself, Sting actually got physical. I think the week before that they might have actually put a beating on him a little bit. But the week before he actually did the Stinger splashes, and it was the first time we'd seen him move in the ring, and it was like, oh, we've got something here. This guy has got a bit of spring in his step that we did not expect, that I did not expect to see, and I think a lot of people did not expect to see. Yeah.
I am a Sting mark. I did not expect him to be able to move, especially with the neck injury that caused his first retirement. The only thing I want is for professional wrestlers these days to be safe. They put their lives on the line for our entertainment, and when it comes to neck and back issues, the last thing I want, one false move, I know it could be over. So I was really surprised to see him move like that in the ring. I was happy, but I was surprised.
And at the time, that was kind of the reason that we were given for, well, at least the reason that we sort of assumed that they were doing a cinematic match here. So it was billed as a street fight, but it was done as a cinematic match. And it was, did two things. Firstly, it it allowed them to sort of work around those perceived limitations that Sting might have. And also, I guess, ensure that they were protecting him from himself in terms of potential injuries. Because, guy's 62, and at the time, the last time he had wrestled was he ended up with a big neck injury, which is not something you want to be messing with when you're at that age. And secondly as well, it actually it allowed them to set the ring up for the exploding barbed wire death match, which happened straight afterwards. So gave them time for, served two purposes there. I before we get into the actual match itself, the only other thing I wanted to bring up was a promo that I just found absolutely hilarious, and I was reminded of it watching through here. Where the one where Darby Allin and Sting, I'm not sure if you remember this one, Howard. They're sitting in a warehouse, standing in like a warehouse, and Sting's like, "You called us hoodlums," and then Darby Allin comes up and he's like, "I am a hoodlum," and he throws his skateboard at the window. And it's meant to be like that they're in the warehouse, but it's just so obviously a set. Like when Darby Allin throws his skateboard, it hits the wall that's on the other side and falls down. And then Sting just starts randomly. Sting goes, "I guess we are hoodlums," and then just starts randomly smashing glass behind. And it's just the most bizarre. Every time I see it, I just laugh because I kind of get Darby's lines, but Sting's just they sound so fake, and then him it's so forced, and him bashing the glass is just so corny. Like it was not it. The fact that I'm laughing at it shows it was meant to be like some sort of badass tough thing of like, we're hoodlums, we don't care. We're gonna take you guys. Think you guys are pretty boys. You guys are think that you're better than us. Well, we don't care because we're going to embrace the fact that we're hoodlums. But it just did not come off that way one bit.
Sting, Bubby, you're not a hoodlum. You're 62 years old. Yeah. I know you want to support your young son. The fact that they were calling them
hoodlums at all. Who says hoodlum? Like a 62-year-old does.
Apparently. But Sting, Bubby, you're not a hoodlum. I understand you wanting to go to Hot Topic to support your young son's art. That's perfectly fine. But Bubby, you're not a hoodlum. And also, that whole the bat smashing the windows was peak old man, please get off my lawn territory. Yeah. I think.
You're not cool,
okay,
now
I gotta
cool.
show I'm tough. Bang, bang, bang. And the bat didn't even break the windows most of the time.
And it's so obviously a set. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because rewatching it, I was reminded again of how hilarious and silly it was.
I actually just watched it before we started talking too, and I will say that the only redeeming quality of that promo, apart from the comedy factor, the unintentional comedy factor, the lasting shot is the TNT Championship being solitarily in the background. This is meant to be a street fight. No championships are on the line. This isn't about glory or anything like that. This is supposed to be a fight where people are going to get hurt. Then they had to ruin it with the talking. But the lasting image of the TNT title just hanging there alone in the background, I think was supposed to convey how serious this was supposed to be.
Yeah, he's leaving it to the side for a night and getting into some serious work. And that brings us to the actual match itself. On the night, it was at Revolution, of course, the Revolution pay-per-view. It was the second last match of the night. And I was excited for this match, even though I've, spent a bunch of time, not necessarily super high on the build-up. The people involved, Brian Cage, Ricky Starks, and Darby Allin, I have immense trust in those guys being able to get it done. And the fact they were doing a cinematic match said to me that, they'll be able to make it work for Sting. So I was enthusiastic and excited to see what they would do in this. How were you feeling going in, Howard?
Honestly, I was intrigued. It's my favorite wrestler's first match back after retiring due to a serious neck injury. I don't care if it's cinematic or not. There's 100 ways this can go wrong. As much as I trust literally everyone in the match, because I know Brian Cage, Ricky Starks, Darby Allin, they're all incredibly safe workers. You can be the safest worker on the planet. You can put as many protective illusions and smoke and mirrors as you want. You're always nervous. And I think actually in the build, didn't Sting actually take a power bomb from Brian Cage before this? I want to say he did in the lead up. Yep. And I think everyone was kind of holding their collective breath that he was going to be okay after that. But still, I was intrigued, but I'll be lying if I said that I didn't have a lot of high hopes for this match. I'll really admit it.
Yeah. They had a really good video package outlining sort of the feud that we've just spent time going over. It was a nice video package, had some good music to it. And once they got to the actual presentation, Taz joins them on the commentary. Says he was banned from attending by Tony Khan, which is a nice touch just to explain why he's not there, because of course he'd be there if he could. The opening shots of Ricky Starks and Brian Cage heading to the warehouse there or at an undisclosed location. They hop into what looks like a Lamborghini together, like a really nice looking sports car, and drive over. It's obvious, this is really heavily stylized in terms of the way it's shot, and there's music going on in the background. Next thing, it cuts from those guys to black and white, and it's Sting in a truck, turns up the radio, and playing on the radio is Darby's entrance music. And then that cuts to Darby skateboarding down some hills, and then cutting to the warehouse, and an army of people in face paint sort of heralding the arrival of Darby Allin and Sting when they get there. What did you think of the intro, Howard?
Like you said, you laid it out perfectly, Sam. The complete contrast in the entrances. You've got Team Taz in their fine sports car. They're slicked back. They are ready to go. And then you have the beat-up truck, the pickup truck. Darby Allin's riding on the back. I think Adam Blampier from Parts Unknown or Wrestle Talk said something like it was if a certain Sam Raimi had directed Back to the Future or something like that, with Darby hanging onto the back of the pickup truck and skateboarding in. The as you said, the people in the face paint, let's call them the army of hoodlums. Heralding the arrival of Sting and Darby. You can tell that they're not the same. They're not supposed to be presented as the same. I mean, they're four world-class competitors, but Ricky and Brian Cage, they're the finer things in life. It's if you squint really hard, you can see echoes of, Four Horsemen style versus Sting fighting, he's just the everyday man, whereas whereas Cage and Starks, they like the finer things in life. They got the expensive shirts and everything
matching
like that.
Uniforms.
Exactly. But they still can kick your ass.
Yep.
In the ring. So yeah, I thought that was a wonderful contrast.
I loved how immediately they established the tone and the stylization for it. It just immediately sets the audience expectations for what's going to come. And an interesting note I love the contrast just in the cars that they had. That was beautiful. But an interesting note was that in this match, Darby actually has his full face painted, whereas normally he only has half his face painted. So he's done that I guess as a sign of unity with Sting, and yeah, I guess showing that he now feels like they're on a joint mission together, and that they're in this together. So the color eventually comes back. As I said, it was kind of black and white for Darby and Sting's entrance, but it sort of comes back on, but it's still very washed out and very gritty looking. But ultimately, it is still a normal wrestling street fight. Like they've got a ring set up in this warehouse. And there's a referee in there even as well. And things kick off with Sting grabbing Darby and hurling him at Starks and Cage. I love that. Like, that's the first thing he does. He just grabs him and yeets him at him. I don't even know if he okayed that with Darby, but he just knows that Darby's going to be fine with that. And they immediately emphasize sort of the unique setting that they've got, with Cage picking Darby up and hurling him into a wall that's like right next to the edge of the ring where they're at. So immediately getting the environment being used. But Darby then, instead of getting thrown into it, he springboards off it and jumps back at Cage. So immediately using the environment to his advantage. But Team Taz do take over early. Starks starts beating down on Sting with Brian Cage going through both Darby and like a whole heap of all of those masked people who accompanied Sting and Darby Allin to the ring. I wanted to take a moment to talk about Cage. We kind of have talked about him briefly. He plays a really important role in the early Team Taz stuff, but then of course after he lost the FTW Championship, sort of disappeared off the screens. So I'm not sure how much we will even cover him on this podcast. You've said you did like him. What are your general thoughts on him, particularly his offense as well, which is on full display in this match?
So, like I said, I'm a fan of Brian Cage, Mr. Get My Spots In, as he's kind of been known from time to time. I watched him a lot in Lucha Underground. That's kind of where I became aware of him. And he's such an imposing figure, but he can do so much in the ring. He can do your typical big man power moves, which in a match with two essentially cruiserweight like a Darby and Ricky Starks and a 62-year-old man who we don't know if he can actually still go, you need that element of true power in this match to make everything kind of work. Brian Cage is kind of a little bit of the glue that kind of holds this match together. If you've got Ricky Starks and Darby, you've got two cruiserweights who can go. They can do the technical stuff. They can do the high-flying stuff. Great. But I do like a little bit of power wrestling. And I do like the feeling of a Goliath final boss. And that's how Cage was originally presented in Team Taz. I mean, his original entrance before the music hit was Taz shouting out, "Who can stop the path of Cage?" He was supposed to be the final boss of Team Taz. And early on, they portray him so well in that role. They go through several spots which just highlight what kind of a specimen he is. I know you may touch on this a little bit later, but him deadlift suplexing Darby and walking up a flight of stairs later on in the match, one of the best spots I think I've seen in a long time. And I love how they actually make use of the space. They don't just stay in the ring. I know it's a street fight, so you're going to come out to the outside, but they use a lot of this warehouse or undisclosed location. And Cage is the perfect vehicle from getting to point A to point B in this match, because it's his power set pieces that set up the transitions to going to the next spot.
Yeah. More than anyone else in AEW, I feel like Cage is a guy who's got lost in the shuffle and lost in the growth. Like, you could say Lance Archer maybe. But more like the upside of Brian Cage is huge. He has such a great look for a wrestler. Like I think I actually saw a tweet by him a couple of days ago, and I couldn't agree more with it, where he said, I was walking through the airport and someone said to me, if you're not a wrestler, you've missed your calling in life. And I could not agree more with that. He is an absolute specimen. And he has an incredible moveset as well, like a really great moveset. But you can only have so many people pushed. Like, he's not a guy who can take losses like Ricky Starks can, for example. He's not a guy who, you can just kind of have sitting thereabouts. He's either right up there and one of the biggest deals in your promotion, or you can't really use him. And there's another world where maybe he gets like a TNT title run and has a chance to really blow us all away. But he just didn't get that. He was the FTW champion, but I don't think he got a chance really to display his wares fully with that. And part of that is just there's only so many spots you can have in a wrestling organization. And unfortunately, I think Brian Cage has sort of gotten pushed out. Maybe they've got plans for him down the line because, as you said, like, this is a guy who looks incredible, has incredible offense. But at the same time, like, I understand exactly why he isn't in that sort of position. Like, it's nothing that he's done really wrong necessarily. Like, I don't think his face run worked particularly well, and he's not great on the mic. And AEW is a promotion where you've got to be able to talk a little bit. But it could have been accommodated if they'd wanted to. But I can understand why how it hasn't worked out for Brian Cage, which is why I say, like, more than anyone else, I think he's a guy who's just purely been lost in the shuffle and the growth of the company. But yeah, you're right. Like, in this match, he plays an absolute linchpin role in terms of the way the action moves about. It follows him, and he is ultimately the big bad for his side. He is the one that is the game changer for his team. And like that first, you see the first pairing off, it's Starks working with Sting, which makes sense. You've got someone who Sting can sort of toss about a little bit early on, get some moves on. And Brian Cage and Darby Allin, they're like perfect opponents because they contrast in their look and size so well. And Cage can really lay a beating on Darby Allin because Darby Allin takes a hell of a beating, and it looks so great when Darby Allin is able to fire back at Cage because of that size difference. And yeah, you're right. Like the match sort of moves on by Cage like dragging Darby through this.
Hey, it's me, your Uncle Cooper. Sorry to interrupt your music. I do love music, especially when it's set at a reasonable volume. Music is really only as good as your speakers. The same is true for minivans. A minivan is only as good as the tires it sits on. And the button on the screen there, it agrees with me. If you click on it, it'll bring you to all the Cooper minivan tires that'll make your minivan a really good minivan. Go with the Coopers! Cooper!
Tired of long waits and rushed care at the ER and urgent care clinic? Next time, stay home and let Dispatch Health bring the power of the hospital to you.
I call Dispatch Health. A care team of medical professionals actually come to your house.
They're the same caliber of people that you would see if you were at a hospital or an urgent care.
Dispatch Health can treat most non-life-threatening emergencies.
They can do the x-rays, they can do stitches.
Urinary tract infections, blood test, urinalysis, ultrasound.
It's almost everything that they can do at the ER.
You never feel rushed. They're there for you and only you.
I felt like their only patient.
And it costs no more than a trip to urgent care because Dispatch Health is covered by most insurance, including Medicare. See if we serve your home at dispatchhealth.com.
Dispatch Health really went above and beyond.
It's wonderful to have care come to your home.
House calls are back, and they're better than ever. Learn more at dispatchhealth.com.
Warehouse, and at one point, as you said, vertical suplexing him and walking up some stairs like he's absolutely nothing. It's an incredible feat and you have to be absolutely strong as an ox to be able to do that, even though Darby Allin is a small bloke. What did you think of sort of the pairings up? You've got Starks in the ring with Sting, and then as we said, Cage just sort of dragging Darby off to the other end of the warehouse and eventually up the stairs and tossing him through a door.
Well, before I talk about that, I will say, just to add on, you talking about Cage and his place and everything like that. And I think I even talked with you kind of in our own private chats and everything like that. Essentially, Brian Cage his spot's been usurped by Wardlow. And Miro. Two big, imposing guys who have a shockingly diverse moveset, who, like Cage, can not only blow you away with power, but can also hit some ridiculously athletic moves when they want to. They're not just pigeonholed. All three men are not. You can't just pigeonhole them into one thing and say, okay, this is what they are, because then they'll come out and shock you with other things. But I just wanted to get that in, apart from moving back into the actual match, it makes sense. The pairings make sense. You have David versus Goliath, the original crux of this story, with Darby Allin and Brian Cage. And you have Ricky Starks with Sting, who you couldn't have asked Sting to be put in much more safer hands than Ricky Starks, someone who's going to bump his ass off and make Sting's, what we thought at the time, limited offense look like $1 billion, but someone who's also going to throw some believable offense. And credit to Sting for, as hopefully this kind of assuaged your fears, as you mentioned earlier, someone who wasn't afraid to sell for Ricky Starks' offense, because Sting does sell a lot of Ricky Starks material, and I think that helps tie the match together. I do love how they transition. A lot of their transitions between switching up dance partners is kind of seamless. Eventually you get Ricky Starks and Darby having their little interlude, and Brian Cage and Sting having their interlude. I think Darby Allin ends up Spider-Manning up a pole and hitting a coffin drop on Darby Allin through like a pallet or something like that. Ricky Starks catches him and they fall through a pallet. And then Brian Cage gets to show how powerful he is and why he needs to be thought of as a serious contender. He's now beat up Darby. He's thrown him through doors. He's thrown him through walls. I'm surprised he didn't throw him through a window. That comes later, I know, with Powerhouse Hobbs. But all four men get a chance to shine with the other people in the match, and I really liked how they were dispersed with each other. And then when you add Powerhouse Hobbs in, Powerhouse Hobbs doesn't seem like he's a fifth wheel there. He seems like he's integral. And Taz on commentary ties everything together. I wrote in my notes that anytime that Sting and Darby got the upper hand, Taz puts in a tour de force on commentary. He's like the homeless man's Bobby Heenan in the 92 Rumble. Every time his boys are in trouble, no, this isn't fair. This isn't fair. We had a plan. Come on, guys. Come on. He really puts over not only his boys, but the seriousness of Darby and Sting. He does a phenomenal job on commentary.
Yeah, so, I love how he's so sure that they've got a plan. He knows they've got an ace up their sleeve. He won't say what it is, but he just keeps saying, "We've got a plan. We've got a plan. They'll stick to the plan. We'll get it done."
There's always a plan.
Yeah, and you're right. To get rid of Brian Cage, Sting and Darby Allin have to both together combine and put him through a table, and that disables Sting as well. And that's when you get the back and forth that you mentioned with Starks and Darby, which is really good. But then the plan comes to fruition, and you get a shirtless Hook coming in, and Powerhouse Hobbs as well, and then it's 4-on-2, and that obviously that was the plan all along, and as you said, Darby gets thrown through at that point. Brian Cage and Powerhouse Hobbs just pick Darby up, each of them holding either his arms or his legs, and just, sandbag toss him straight through a glass window frame, which like shatters as he goes through. And then as Darby Allin falls down, the wooden frame falls down and smacks him on the head. What did you, without going, I guess, too far down the line towards the end of this match, but what did you think of like the escalation of violence in this match?
It made sense. Everything made sense in this match, and I think it was brilliantly shot. Also, credit to Powerhouse Hobbs. I think this is actually the first time in history that someone actually sent for Hook. So credit to Powerhouse Hobbs being a pioneer of our time. Credit to you, Powerhouse Hobbs. Thank you for sending Hook for the first time.
And this only added to the legend of Hook, seeing him with no shirt on coming out, because it was like, not only is he good looking face, he's pretty well put together himself for the rest of his body as well.
Oh yeah, but everything made sense. They didn't just go for the big spots early, and I love, because it's a street fight. You know what you're getting. You're gonna get plunder. You're going to get some insane spots. You're going to get a lot. To quote Jim Ross, it's going to be a bowling shoe ugly match for the most part. But they do a good job of tempering their bluster a bit and spreading out the spots. You got a table crash with Brian Cage and Sting, like you mentioned. Then you've got, the first coffin drop. Then you've got the 4-on-2 beatdown, then the swing into the glass, which that pane of glass / window, whatever it was, that just broke perfectly, I gotta say. And then you get in towards the closing stretches, and everything makes sense. There's a linear progression, which I've got to give them credit for.
Absolutely. Yeah, so as I said, they put him through that, and then that leaves Team Taz to fight Sting. They're going sort of back downstairs towards the ring. I guess at that point they smell that there's blood in the water and want to get it back to the ring so they can get the pin. And they got, that's back down to the original warehouse space that they were in. And Cage, he's the one that's leading the assault. He is the main guy in Team Taz at this point. And as I said, I think he plays a crucial part in this match. And they've got the numbers advantage until Darby Allin, he's back up and he calls from above and he calls out to the Stinger and throws down the baseball bat. And Sting's able to take advantage. He beats them with the baseball bat and then he breaks it over the back of the machine, Brian Cage. And then, speaking of escalation of violence, they put Cage on this wooden sort of contraption that's been set up between the two rows that they've got in the warehouse that they've been going down. Darby Allin from the second story of this warehouse, I'm guessing probably about 5-6 meters up out of the window, comes down with I think it's meant to be a coffin drop. He kind of comes down with an elbow, but it's just an absolutely wild and crazy height to be jumping off. Howard, this is obviously a crazy moment, crazy move to do. But one of the things I wanted to ask, I guess, does it have the same impact in, this very stylized and cinematic match that they're having?
So the whole Darby rising up, throwing the bat to Sting, who basically Sting getting the bat, by the way, great catch, Sting, but it basically rejuvenates him like a goth-dressed Popeye. Because Sting is getting absolutely worn out by Team Taz, but all of a sudden the bat is like his spinach. And then all of a sudden he comes alive. Also, that bat, he's had that bat for 25 years now, Jiminy Cricket. It's been a while. But that bat is technically the only bat that Sting has had. Technically, since his days fighting the NWO, the fact that bat's had so many homers and yet gets broken off the back of a ground rule double, essentially off of Cage's back, that's what causes the bat to break. I don't know whether that says something for the bat or Cage's back. Still not sure which. But then that that elbow coffin drop thing that Darby does, and you see Sting just look, because essentially you don't know where they are. Honestly, none of us do, but Sting just looks down the bottom, just goes, all right, then goes back to the ring. Okay, we got business to take care of. We'll find out if Darby and Cage are alive late. We'll find out. They should be okay. They just fell 5 stories or something like that, 3 or 4 stories. They'll be fine. They're protected. We got a match to finish. Let's go.
Yeah, I guess it speaks to the trust that Sting has built up, and he knows that Darby's given him this moment. He's taken out Brian Cage, who has been the difference maker for his team. He's taken out the guy that has been able to beat both of them down, and he has been able to move. Yeah, he's been able to take out the difference maker, and he knows that Darby Allin has sacrificed himself so that he can then go on and get the win. And it does leave him alone with Ricky Starks, which I love that sort of. It's a moment of trust. It's a moment in their relationship where Darby Allin is he's got the trust in Sting to take out Starks, and Sting is not immediately concerned with Darby Allin because he knows that this is what Darby would have wanted him to do. And yeah, both Starks and Sting get back to the ring. I do like that there's a little bit back and forth, including Sting hitting like a reverse victory roll as a counter to a powerbomb. 62-year-old Sting doing that, and gets a close 2 off that. However, it is relatively quick once they get back in the ring. They don't muck about. Sting quickly gets the Scorpion Death Drop, and the match finishes with like a close-up of Sting looking, really badass. An extreme close-up of Sting looking really badass. What did you think of the ending moments, Howard?
I loved it. Specifically, all credit to Ricky Starks for being a master of in-ring psychology in this match, even if it's a cinematic match. One of the spots in the closing moments that stuck out with me was the Stinger Splash that Starks avoids, but he waits until the last possible second, and as he leaves, he takes the turnbuckle pad off, and Sting catches it full on in his sternum. And I loved how Ricky waited until the literal last possible second to move, because it added so much. Ricky knew what was coming. He's watched enough tape of Sting. He knows the splash is coming, so you know what? We're going to make him pay. And he thought that might be enough. But then the wily veteran Sting manages to come back. And as much as theoretically, honestly, once again, as I'm a big Sting and Darby Allin fan, you could argue that Team Taz needed this win more after the weeks of the repetitive one-beat downs. But the ending gave credit to the work that all 4 men put in, and the ending felt earned, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
It wasn't Sting just squashing Ricky Starks for the sake of squashing him. They fought, and, Ricky never gave up. It was Sting having to use his ingenuity to beat Ricky, not, Sting's just going to win because legend wins. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that thing that Ricky Starks did. He does one of the reasons I like Ricky Starks, he does a lot of little things well like that. One of the things that's great about that is he doesn't make Sting look like an idiot, because he waits until Sting's launched himself. So Sting can't change his directory because he's in flight. He's coming in for a splash. He waits until Sting moves. There's plenty of other wrestlers who will have moved well before Sting's launched himself, and that just makes the wrestler who's running at the turnbuckle look silly. Another little thing I love that Ricky Starks does, it's not in this match, but just a thing that he indulged me for a minute, is watch him when they do the drop down and run sequence and the leapfrog sequence. He throws himself at his opponent's feet because he's actually trying to trip the opponent, which is what's meant to be happening in that sort of sequence, which happens, in nearly every match. And so often is just contrived, and we've just sort of accepted it. But Ricky Starks, he just makes sure he gets that right. So you're right to shout out Ricky Starks there. Heartily endorsed by me. But yeah, look, I like that this bit didn't stick around too much. You did get one little false moment. But the biggest spot in this match has already happened with Darby Allin jumping down to take out Brian Cage. They didn't need to spend too long on this. They gave one moment of doubt and quickly overcome, and then Sting hits the moment, hits his finish, and it's over. What did you think of, I guess, the overall presentation of this match? The aesthetics of it, the way it was shot, the sort of grainy, gritty style that it was done in. What did you think of it?
Overall, I've got to say this is one of the better cinematic matches that were done. Credit to companies like AEW and WWE and others for finding a way around the no fans allowed in the arenas and getting creative doing it. Cinematic matches kind of became the scapegoat and everything like that. They became the quick fix for how to tell a story that you wanted to throw a little bit more smoke and mirrors. And this, there were so many cinematic matches and everything like that. Mm-hmm. This is arguably in the top half of worked and shot cinematic matches. I'm not going to say it's the best one, because that one happened my personal favorites, the Firefly Funhouse in WWE. But in terms of the ones that AEW did, this is right up there. It's top 2, top 3. Like I said, overall, like you said, the gritty nature, this isn't meant to be a wrestling match. This is meant to be a fight like you'd see out in the streets and stuff like that once the bars close down and, people have had too much to drink. This isn't meant to be some sort of spectacular. We got 4 men that don't like each other. Let's let them fight. Let's let them do it safely. Overall, really well done. And also a credit to an AEW Revolution card that, was kind of hit or miss, but was overall a solid card. So...
yeah, this is very much a Darby Allin production in terms of the way it looks, the way it's stylized. Even like you've got the Goobers sort of going in with their masks and they sort of disappear. I don't know what happens to them at the end, but it's kind of a movie as well, so they can kind of just disappear and that's all right.
They'll be fine.
A couple things I really like about it, its structure. So it's structured very well in terms of, even though it's, as I said, it's like a Darby Allin production, of course. It's very much about Sting. This is a match that's centered around Sting. Brian Cage is the main antagonist, and he has to be he's the one that has to be taken out. He's the damage dealer, but Sting is always the one who is making the saves. He's nearly always the one that's evening the score, except for when Darby Allin does that final jump to sacrifice himself and let Sting pick up the win. It's always Sting on his side who is making the save, evening the score, which is perfect for this match, which is the return of Sting to the ring, his debut match in AEW. This could have been his last match in AEW as well. And it is a match that is centered around him, and that is the right thing to do in this instance. And I really like that structure that you mentioned. In terms of, I guess, comparison to other AEW matches, this is not something that's like played for gags, and I think that's a good thing in this case. Like I love the Stadium Stampede. That's one of my absolute favorite matches, and I wouldn't say that I like this one more than Stadium Stampede. But it is different, and it is the right thing to do for this match was to play it completely straight, and that's what they did.
Oh, wholeheartedly agreed. I said this in replying to the review of that match a while ago, and I'll say it again. Stadium Stampede felt like a COVID-induced fever dream. And I mean that in the best possible way. That was a phenomenal match. It's the best cinematic match AEW did. Stadium Stampede won. Like you said, this match, I'm glad they didn't play it for gags or anything like that. This was supposed to be serious. They played it as such, and they did a great job. So I wholeheartedly agree with your statement.
Yeah, and look, I guess to take it and compare it with other ones, because I'm probably not as high on the cinematic matches as some people are. Probably more so than others. I guess I'm in the middle somewhere. I really liked this one. I loved Stadium Stampede, but I disliked a lot of what was done. The most, I guess, the closest I would compare this to another one that got done in 2020 would be the Boneyard match with the Undertaker. In terms of it's played very straight. It does have that music underneath it, and it's very heavily stylized. But at the same time, it's done with a very specific goal in mind. In that case, it was to make the Undertaker look like an absolute badass, to look like the American badass. And, you know, AJ Styles and the Good Brothers did an incredible job in doing that, and the WWE production did an incredible job in sort of making that happen as well. And I think that's what this was, but for AEW and with Sting instead of the Undertaker. What do you think of that comparison? What did you think of the Boneyard match?
Overall, I think it's pretty on the nose, and I think that it's honestly hilarious that we're comparing The Undertaker and Sting once again. Because that's over the last half of their careers, that's all anyone ever did. The dream match was always Sting versus Undertaker. And now we're talking about cinematic matches, and essentially, once again, we're comparing them. I think you're right on the nose there. Sure, both matches had their little comedy spots that were played for levity and stuff like that. But, you know, for the most part, everyone played it straight, and they were used as vehicles to get over these old gunslingers, in the Undertaker's case, one last time. For Sting, this was a setup for something that none of us expected. Like you said, this could have been his last match, and honestly, I would have been okay with that. But then you look at what he's done since, in the year and a half since that match, and the fact that he's putting in some of the, if not the best work of his career, of his 30, almost 40-year career, is absolutely astounding. And he's now 63 years old, and no one could have expected this. So I think it's a credit. I think the Boneyard match was a credit to WWE's production team on how everything they shot and how everything made sense there. Even the spooky stuff made sense. And it's a credit to AEW's production team that everything here made sense. Both companies are really good at telling a story when they want to, and both knocked it out of the park. Once again, I hate saying it, but of the two, I like the Firefly Funhouse match more on WrestleMania weekend. I loved the absolute absurdity of that one, but I still have the utmost amount of respect for the Boneyard match, because the one thing that we were truly missing from Undertaker's waning months and years was a return to the American Badass, and they tied off that perfectly. Whereas Sting is now your Clint Eastwood character. He's that old man that you know is eventually going to be put down by a young gun, but he's not going to do it quietly.
Yeah.
And with every match that he's done, you look at matches like, honestly, it was Double or Nothing 2021, that tag match with Men of the Year and Darby Allin, where he's jumping off the stage onto Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky. And him doing these dives off of the concourses through tables.
Ridiculous.
In some matches.
Yeah.
Sting, please Be careful. I beg you, Steve Borden, the man, please be careful. But the fact that he's doing it, and it also speaks to the level of talent that AEW has at its disposal and the amount of trust that everyone has in each other, that he's willing to put his body on the line for these spots. I mean, you look at, I never expect, and I hope I'm right about this, when it comes to this AEW Sting, I don't want him to be a title. I just want him to be that continuing mentor, and I love that we're on that track. Darby Allin is the star of the two, the future star, the person that you need to be building around, and they seem to be doing it. And honestly, I wouldn't mind. I know I'm probably getting way too far into this, but I kind of hope there's one day where Darby ends up leaving Sting. I'd like to see how that plays out. Because eventually Sting's going to have to retire. He's going to have to leave, and enjoy the rest of his golden years with his wonderful family. I think about his article in the Players Tribune a while ago, a couple of months ago, and how he's reformed his life and how it could have been over in around the time WCW was purchased. And I'm in awe of how he was able to turn his life around and find and silence his own personal demons so that he could be a better role model for the stars coming up today. And I think that's above all else. That's why I was kind of interested to see why he was paired up with Darby, because Darby can be that reckless guy. And Sting will allow him to be that reckless guy, but Sting is also his grounder. To let him know, like, okay, you can do all this, but also, let's also build towards the future because there's money on you. And I love that dichotomy. He's a father with his young, reckless son, essentially. And eventually, most young kids eventually rebel against their parents. I'm interested to see if they go that route. And, I'm kind of interested to see, I know this is completely going off track and I apologize for kind of hijacking this, but I'd be interested to see Darby Allin heel turn almost because he is a phenomenal babyface. I will root for Darby Allin every day of the week and twice on Sundays because he just has that innate charisma and that innate ability. Like you said, to work with a guy, like you said earlier, with a guy like Jon Moxley and have it be seamless. To work with guys like Joey Janela, but also to step into a ring with guys like MJF. I remember his match, I think it was with MJF, to where both men had something to prove. Like they both wanted to be known as professional wrestlers, not just these guys with character that couldn't go in the ring. And both men showed out. But it'll be interesting to see where they move forward. I don't know if that was planned at all. So
if they wanted to turn Darby Allin heel, which I don't know why you'd want to do that, to be honest. But
I don't.
Other than just to see what it would be like. But one of AEW's problems actually is they're so good at building faces that their heel side is really quite shallow at the moment. But I don't think Darby Allin would be close to the top of that list of people you might turn heel. But I mean that's an open goal there with Sting, right? Like that's something that they could easily do if they wanted to get him to. I don't know why he would do that. Like there'd have to be some sort of character reason as to why he would do that. But it's an open goal, right? Like if they wanted to turn Darby Allin heel, then having him attack Sting would be something they could do. I guess to get back to, I said I don't think they should do it, and I don't know why they would, but it's something they could do if they wanted to. Getting it back to this, I guess, and back to Sting and Darby, like as I said, I was really hesitant with Sting coming to AEW. There was red flags going off in my mind, and I didn't like the partnership he had with Darby Allin. But you know what? I was absolutely wrong on both fronts. I should have trust. I mean, I guess I did trust AEW, but AEW have shown how they can get it right. and how you can book a veteran and have him in like a role that elevates the people that are around him. He still gets to, he gets that shot of adrenaline every now and again. He will fire up and he will make a difference in a match, but he's not the star. He's not winning titles, and he's not making guys who, he's not making stars. He's making, maybe some tag team wrestlers or whatever. But he's not making stars look like idiots or look like they're lesser than. He will have that burst of energy and that burst of adrenaline where everything comes back to him. But he's not the guy who is the absolute dominant force, who is overwhelming the people that are around him. And I've come around on the relationship he has with Darby Allin. I think it's actually really quite a good relationship, quite a heartwarming one. They've obviously got, and as I said, part of that was watching this match and how you see the trust that they've built up in one another. Darby Allin's trust in Sting to finish the match, Sting's, acceptance of Darby Allin for who he is. He's not trying to stop him being who he is. He's accepting of that, and he is supportive of him, and he wants to get him through it. So, and this match was a big part of that. This match was a big part in showing me and giving me, I guess, hope that they would get this so right. And I think that's what they've done since this has happened. So yeah, I'm a fan of this match. It's not my favorite match ever, but I really enjoyed rewatching it, and I really enjoyed going back to it. And if they wanted to do it again with Sting, they absolutely could. But it's crazy how this bloke who's 62 has had more. He's got more fuel in the tank than I think even he thought he had. And he is, having an absolute blast by the looks of things when he's out there. And the crowd is having an absolute blast watching him, I guess, have this second life, if you will, on TV, that, he didn't think he would get.
Wholeheartedly agree. It's been wonderful to see Sting with this run. It's a good way to close the book on Sting, I think.
If he retires in like a year or two's time, absolutely, he has had a tremendous few years in AEW, and he can go off and be with his family, and that's absolutely fantastic. And I'm sure he feels a bit fulfilled, because he was not a guy who, like, I don't like to read motives into, and I don't know him, but he was not a guy who wanted to go to WWE. He held out for so long, and he eventually succumbed. I guess he thought it's never going to happen. Like, I can only imagine the reason he eventually ended up with WWE was because he thought nothing's ever going, like, the WWE is going to be wrestling from here on. And fortunately, the right storm of things happened, and he's been able to be a part of that, which I think is quite magical for him, and probably very fulfilling for him as a person as well.
This match and his subsequent matches in AEW have shown why I was a fan. It's kind of, his run in AEW has reinvigorated and reminded me why I was a fan back when he had the blonde flat top haircut and the multicolored swirl face paint, battling with Kensuke Sasaki in Starrcade 95, and then the 2 years long battle with the NWO. I'm not going to talk about Red and Black Wolfpack NWO. You can't make me. But then his run in TNA, where admittedly, I hate saying it, should not have been the world champion, stuff like that, kind of diluted my, he'll always be my favorite, but I'm going to move away. I was stunned when he came to WWE. I think I marked out for about 20 solid minutes when he made his debut at the Survivor Series and helped Dolph Ziggler win that.
And that was incredible. Match. And I actually liked the Triple H match as well.
It is good, but Jiminy Christmas, was that overbooked. Oh, Jiminy Christmas. Like, I love that he got his WrestleMania match, because that's one of the few things that was left on his wrestling bingo card. and everything on his checklist. I liked the match up until it became overbooked with DX versus the NWO, because in my opinion, it actually didn't need that. Triple H and Sting are two good enough workers that they could have told a brilliant story on their own. But that being said, it's still a nice bit of memorabilia. His matches with Seth Rollins are great pieces of memorabilia of wrestling history. And, I was sad when he retired. I understood why he retired and everything. And to this day, I'm pretty sure that, everyone in that match kind of wishes that things would have turned out differently. I also think that, maybe the reason why Sting is back in AEW is because he kind of wanted to go out on his own terms. You see guys that have come back from neck injuries, like Edge, who came back from that miraculous neck injury that kept him off the shelf for 9 years. I think, especially in the social media age that we live in, it's not enough to have your matches on videotape and on YouTube anymore to have people remember you by. You want to be able to go out on your own terms. And I think that's what this career, once again, I don't know Sting and I'll never pretend to know him, but I'd like to think that this is his way of going out on his own terms. Whenever that is, and he wanted to write one final chapter for himself. And man, am I loving the story that he's writing. Overall.
Yeah, and I think it's been a longer chapter than he thought he'd write, which is a nice thing. Yeah, a nice thing for him. Well,
anything else, Sam?
No, I was just thinking we have talked, and it's been great. I've really loved going back and watching this match. I don't know how many more cinematic matches we'll do here on the podcast. There hasn't really been too many since COVID finished. There was the Stadium Stampede 2, which didn't actually make any of the lists, and I didn't really like, so I don't think I'll be going back and watching that. So this will be the last cinematic match we review on the podcast. Who knows? But look, I appreciate you coming on and making some time today. If people want to talk to you about this match or anything AEW or wrestling, then please tell them where they can find you.
So I'm on Twitter at Howard_E_Schill. I love talking about wrestling, obviously, sports, Disney. I'm working my way through a Disney culinary school, so if anyone wants to talk cooking or anything like that in addition to wrestling, I'm open ears and everything like that. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, at Howard Schilling on Instagram. You'll see a lot of Disney posts, so if you're not into Disney, probably not the thing for you. But yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much for having me on again, Sam. Shout out really quick to the Wrestling Headlines Columns Forum. Right now, we're doing the all-time wrestling draft, and the group of people, including Sam and myself, Ms. Fan, James Boyd, Rich Latta, Type, everyone, and Jake Will and everyone there, they're putting together some phenomenal shows. I'm so glad that I'm part of that, and if anyone goes over to the Wrestling Headlines Columns Forum in the near future, or by the time this is recorded, if you haven't already done so, go back and take a look. I'm sure that the cards are going to be phenomenal, and I can't wait to see what everyone's put out. So,
yeah, great shout out there. That's been a lot of fun. Something we do every year for Wrestling Headlines. I think this might be the last we do it for a little while, but a draft with a bunch of people, and it's been great having you in that as well, Howard. That's at wrestlingheadlines.com, and you can go to you can click the forum tab to go in there, and you'll be able to find the card. We've drafted rosters, and you'll be able to find our cards on the forum there, and have a read. Let us know what you think. And if you're ever in Disney World and you find yourself getting a prime rib, chances are it's Howard's that's cutting it off for you. So make sure you say good day to him
Crystal
there.
Palace.
Yes, indeed. But look, I am Sir_Samuel on Twitter if you want to come and talk to me. And it's been a pleasure having you on, Howard. It's been a pleasure having people listen. As I said at the start, if you have enjoyed the podcast, please rate and review it on your podcast app of choice, be it Apple, Spotify, Google, whatever you use. Please rate and review it. That just helps more people find the show. And if you would like to support us financially, you can donate at Red Circle. There is a link in the description of this podcast. And all of that just goes to supporting the podcast, paying for things like audio hosting, equipment, all that sort of stuff. So all of that is much appreciated. But more than anything else, I appreciate you for listening every week of this podcast. It's a thrill to make it. I always love digging into these matches, and I can't wait to do it again next week, and I will see you all then. Bye.
Tired of long waits and rushed care at the ER and urgent care clinic? Next time, stay home and let Dispatch Health bring the power of the hospital to you.
I call Dispatch Health. A care team of medical professionals actually come to your house.
They're the same caliber of people that you would see if you were at a hospital or an urgent care.
Dispatch Health can treat most non-life-threatening emergencies.
They can do the x-rays, they can do stitches.
Urinary tract infections, blood test, urinalysis, ultrasound.
It's almost everything that they can do at the ER.
You never feel rushed. They're there for you and only you.
I felt like their only patient.
And it costs no more than a trip to urgent care because Dispatch Health is covered by most insurance, including Medicare. See if we serve your home at dispatchhealth.com.
Dispatch Health really went above and beyond.
It's wonderful to have care come to your home.
House calls are back, and they're better than ever. Learn more at dispatchhealth.com.